Ciao.
Hold tight a little longer with Big Red.
The channels, and all of a sudden, there it was. Can you imagine? Hi, Ken Ray here, welcoming you to another edition of In a Few Minutes, done in a way that it's not normally done, because usually we come in the middle of a conversation with me and somebody else. Today, I need to give you some backstory on what we're doing today. So you may remember on In a Few Minutes a few weeks ago, I was doing it as a video thing. I started putting them up on YouTube, right? So I would have somebody on and we would talk on video and something would get messed up and I wouldn't enjoy the show as much. Good times. Still, I kind of got the YouTube bug. And so for the past 3.5 weeks, I've actually been going live every afternoon on YouTube. It was kind of moving around to different times. Sometimes it would be like 5:30 Eastern, sometimes 7:30 Eastern. And I finally decided that I needed to get in the habit of doing it at a particular time. So, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. Pacific is when I've been doing it for the past couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks maybe. And I think it's going to be a thing, and I think I'm going to put it out as a podcast. So people can join me live, and that would be great. Or they can catch the replay later. I think that's going to happen. I don't know for sure, but I think that's what's going to happen. As a proof of concept, I've actually been recording it every day and turning it around as a podcast that I've not been publishing anywhere. Just seeing, could I do it? What kind of problems will I run into? And the good news is turning it into a podcast has been really easy, except for when I forget to record. But even then, the show's only about 25 minutes long, so I can just tape it again off YouTube. Tape it. I can just record it again off YouTube and turn it around and put it out as a podcast. So that's why we have this recording of this thing today, which is part of the thing that I did live on YouTube yesterday, talking about various things that happened at the high-speed event. Now, the problem is I've been talking to people who have been watching it on YouTube, so I don't stop and explain everything that came before because my assumption is people have seen the last one and the one before that and the one before that. If I just play for you the second half of yesterday's show, it's not going to make a lot of sense because it includes stuff that we have not talked about on macOS Ken. Or if we did, we've only talked about them once and not, any other times. For example, a few weeks ago, one of the guys from AT&T, hold on, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for his name. McElfrey, I believe was his last name. First name, to be determined. I'm kidding. That would be a stupid name. First name, Jeff. Last name, McElfresh. McElfresh is the guy's last name. He is the CEO, AT&T Communications. And he basically was saying he didn't understand why anybody would go for the 5G service. And I've been trying to figure out what his deal was with that. Was he saying that AT&T's 5G service was weak? Was he saying it was going to cost too much? Hey, wait a second. Maybe he knew something none of us did about Verizon turning up at Apple's event. So, okay, that is the first thing that you need to be hip to. The other thing you need to know about is a weird thing that happened between T-Mobile and Betty Crocker. Yes, the cake people. One of the things that I've been going on about on this daily YouTube thing, and you've certainly heard me talk about it here as well, is how confusing the messaging around 5G can be. Verizon did an okay explaining it at yesterday's event. T-Mobile had this crazy idea, though, that what they would do is they would get Betty Crocker, yes, that Betty Crocker, to make a cake for them, a cake mix that they would then give out to people. Now, by the time I heard about it, all the cake mixes were already gone. They're not going to be sold in stores. They're not going to be available anywhere else. You might be able to find one on eBay someday, but it was just a promotional thing. And what they were doing was they were saying that the different layers of the cake represented the different layers of 5G service. Kind of like when Verizon said at the high-speed event that they had the, millimeter wave band and the nationwide band, or the ultra-wide band and the nationwide band. See, it's all still confusing. Anyway, you're going to hear me talk about the cake on this thing, and you might think, well, the cake is a lie, or he's just gone crazy. I'm not saying neither of those things are true. I'm just saying there is actually a predicate for the cake talk. So, there is all of that leading to what I talked about yesterday with a very few people on YouTube. Please, here's the other stuff. Just sort of the random stuff that occurred to me as I was watching it, and stuff that I'm still wondering about. Let's start with some of the things tied specifically to 5G, and I don't know where to go. This will also probably be all over the place. What was up with the emphasis on Verizon? AT&T has 5G, and we may now have a better idea of why the AT&T guy was like, yeah, I don't even know who wants to pay for 5G. Nuts to them. It could be because AT&T knew that Apple is now in bed with Verizon on its 5G promotion. Does that mean anything? I don't know. It could be like buying naming rights to a stadium, right? You go to Oracle Arena or wherever, go to Bridgestone Arena, and if they tomorrow change the name of Bridgestone Arena to, Carly Fee Arena, that's a friend's joke. If they still do that, I mean, it's still the same team playing in there, right? Apple is now talking a lot about Verizon. Verizon is now talking a lot about iPhone 5G. Verizon was going to talk a lot about iPhone 5G anyway, unless, of course, Samsung was going to start paying them major bucks to start talking about them more. It's possible that the reason that the AT&T guy was like, I'm not even sure who would pay more for it. I mean, it's just adding another thing to why he was downplaying 5G so much. Maybe it's because they know they have an inferior product. Maybe it's because they still want to sell cable service. Maybe it's because they want to try to take a bit of the shine off of the iPhone 5G because they know that Verizon gets to legitimately brag about it while everybody else kind of gets to brag about it. Watching the gentleman from Verizon, I want to call him Gunther. I'm pretty sure that's not right. Boy, was he Teutonic. What is his name? Not Bob Borchers, that's the guy from Apple. Hans Vestberg. I'm sorry, Hans, not Gunther. Hans Vestberg. Watching him talk about it, I found myself thinking, this is still like a long hill to climb, or a tough hill to climb as far as getting people to understand the different levels of 5G. Maybe T-Mobile wasn't wrong doing a cake with Betty Crocker, because it gets kind of confusing. He starts talking about the ultra-wideband thing, right? Because the ultra-wideband, or the MM wave, I suppose, or the millimeter wave, or the wave, that's going to work in densely populated areas, which T-Mobile pointed out in their promotion yesterday can be blocked by trees and glass and the occasional umbrella. But if you're in sort of a centrally located place where they're blanketing with that, that's going to be super high speed, and that's great. And they spent a lot of time talking about that, and then I believe they said it's available in about 4 cities right now. It's going to be available in 16 cities later this month, and 60 cities by the end of the year. But that's still going to be like right in the densely populated areas, which we shouldn't be in unless we happen to live there, because hashtag social distancing, hashtag these uncertain times. He did actually mention that. He was like, in all of these places, which I know we're going to be able to safely go back to someday. So that's money well spent. I like the fact that you don't have to choose a model of iPhone based on whether or not it has 5G. Rolling out 5G to all of the iPhones was just an excellent idea. Apple is leaving it to the carriers to explain why you need this, why you might want it. The decision making is going to be on the carrier side. This is not an ad. In fact, so much this is not an ad, I won't say the name of the carrier, but my carrier has 5G if you have a 5G phone. My carrier has 4G if you have a 4G phone. Such is the case for all of these phones as well. If you're someplace where 5G doesn't work, it'll default to LTE or 4G. I know that my carrier is not going to charge more for 5G versus 4G. I don't know if that's the case for Verizon. I haven't had time to look. We do know that that is the case for AT&T, that they are going to charge more because, again, you had their CEO of their wireless area sitting there saying, I don't know why people would pay more for it, but, they can, I guess. The more I think about it, I think that's just sour grapes. on his part. Explaining 5G is still going to be confusing. So they talked about the ultra-wideband, and they said it's available in these 60 cities. But then they talked about their 5G nationwide, which they say is available all across the country. I believe T-Mobile actually claims a wider area and about 30 million more people covered, somewhere between 30 million and 50 million. I can't remember if Verizon said that they covered 180 million people or 200 million. I know the T-Mobile said they cover 230 million. Okay. I mean, you still have to get it in your hand. You still have to see. The other thing that I found really interesting is I'm just an average consumer. I mean, I'm just an average consumer. That's it. I know that when it is time for me to get a new phone, my iPhone is going to have 5G, and that's fine with me. It doesn't really make me want to rush out. I kind of want to rush out because I kind of want to know the difference. But it sounds like there's no guarantee that you're going to see a noticeable difference depending on where you live or where you happen to be or how you happen to be using it. There was an emphasis on games, which I'm sure appealed to a lot of people. There was an emphasis on photography, which I'm sure appealed to a lot of people. There was an emphasis on video, which I'm sure appealed to a lot of people. And finally, there's the emphasis on styling and price. That's where they got me. I want that blue phone. I love my yellow phone, but that blue phone is just pretty. It's fascinating. I mean, it feels to me like it's the next iPhone. That's what it feels to me like it is. I did not see anything that said to me, you have to have this phone. I was still looking for somebody to say, here's why 5G is going to be the best. And mostly what we saw was speed. Though if you're listening to them, you're only getting that speed in optimal conditions. I believe they said ideal conditions. Like Verizon actually said that they've gotten download speeds as fast as 4 gigabytes. Gigabytes. As far as 4 gigabits or bytes in the one of the two. That they got that in optimal conditions, although then the guy who talked about the iPhone antenna and who talked about the 5G service, Arun Matthias, said that they'd gotten speeds as high as 3.5 down for the iPhone. 5G is still going to be confusing. It's going to be confusing for a while. I'm going to be the guy who doesn't really care that much when it's time for my next iPhone. And, you know, I may go nuts and end up ordering one this weekend. I probably won't because I really don't need it. I'll probably just, you know, sort of sit there white knuckling the whole thing, not hitting the buy button as everybody else buys theirs. There was one other hardware thing I forgot to mention. What is it called? Ceramic shield, which they grow like a kind of crystal inside the glass, apparently. So it's 4 times more likely to not break if you drop it, which will not mean anything the first time you drop it and it breaks. There's plenty there to like. There was nothing there that I, you know, personally felt like I had to have, which is not to say it's a disappointment at all. I think I'm just now, I buy iPhones the way I buy iPads, the way I buy computers. When it's time for a new one, I'll go out and find the best one for me. I don't think I've ever had a new iPhone the year after I got another iPhone. That's not true. The first one. I went from iPhone to iPhone 3G that year, but that was just so I could pass my other phone off to somebody else. I'm not the guy who buys the new thing every year. There's a lot here to love, and I'm really looking forward to loving my next iPhone when it's time for me to get my next iPhone. Seriously, really do seem to be doing that every day. So if you want to be part of it, youtube.com/KenRay goes off at 3:30 Eastern. Nope, I'm never going to get the time right. Goes off at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, Monday through Friday. I do not know what I'm going to be talking about from one day to the next because it is driven by news, not unlike macOS Ken. I certainly hope you'll join me, and if it ever becomes a podcast, I'll let you know. In the meantime, I think I'm just supposed to keep talking and pretending like the conversation is continuing even though the music is coming up.